can do so by emailing public.comment@bcps.k12.md.us. You can call the board office, or you can visit the board office in the Alice G. Pender Hughes building in room 406. And we also have a form where you can submit policy feedback asynchronously. If you visit our website and go to the board policies section of the website, you're able to submit, select a drop down and submit any type of comments that you want about a specific policy, and we'll receive that. The chat function for this meeting is disabled. Well, it's enabled, but we will not be using it as a tool to gather feedback or answer questions from the public at this time. But you can also email us at any time at schoolboard@bcps.k12.md.us, and you will receive a response from our board staff. So I will get us started. We have a pretty light agenda today. And first up, we're going to be discussing JFC Interdistrict Student Transfer Policy, JFC-RA, EAA, and EEA and EEA-RA Student Transportation Services, Tier 3. Do we have someone to present?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present this today. We are here to talk a little bit about our proposed revisions to Board Policy JFC, which governs interdistrict student transfers, as well as EEA, which governs student transportation services. This work kind of reflects cross-functional collaboration and alignment between several offices, including our transportation department, our enrollment department, legal, and school operations. Next slide. Okay, so as we anchor this work, it's important to recognize that these revisions are directly aligned to our board's strategic priorities, most notably Priority 5 and Priority 7, which directly address such things as equity, access, and stakeholder engagement. At its core, this work is really about ensuring that our policies just don't exist on paper, but that they actually are clear, they're consistent, and kind of recognize experiences for students and families that are equitable across every school that is within this city. So for today, we're going to cover three key areas. One is going to be JFC, again, that covers our intra-district student transfers. The next would be our proposed revisions to EEA, which my colleagues in transportation will cover, that govern, again, our student transportation services and related policies. And then we'll go over a little bit about our stakeholder engagement plan and the timeline that is associated. So why are these policies being presented together? We know that this was intentional. Let me start off by saying that we know that student mobility and transportation are linked. Every transfer that is made in the city has real implications for family travel, as well as for us, bus route, ride times, driver availability, and just overall system capacity. Certainly here in Baltimore, we remain committed to our tradition of really respecting our families' decision to move responsibly, but we want to make sure that we can do so in a way that's predictable, that's responsible, and most importantly, operationally sustainable. So by aligning these policies, we can reduce some ambiguity. We can ensure that families, schools, our offices here at North Avenue are all operating from kind of the same clear expectations and sheet of music. So before we get started, we want to kind of go over a few key terms that we use all the time, but we want to make sure that we have a clear understanding for all that are reviewing this presentation. One is our school choice process. Whenever we talk about school choice as a process, here in Baltimore City, we were referring to the process by which fifth graders and our eighth graders apply for the middle and high school of their choice. So again, whenever we're talking about school choice process, it is for our fifth and eighth graders that are looking to select their next schools for their journey. The transfer window, that is a designated time period in the summer. Usually begins kind of the first week of July, right after the 4th of July holiday, and goes for 4 to 6 weeks, in which families can come and request a different school assignment. For this policy, we call it the intra-district student transfer policy. That is for a student that is seeking to transfer from one city school to another city school. So this does not cover kind of transfers outside of the district. It's just those transfers that are from one city school to another. And then transportation is related service. That is, again, when a student with IEP or a Section 504 plan is determined to require transportation. This process is determined on a very individualized basis, and really considers the specific needs of that particular student. So just a little bit about Board Policy JFC. This serves as the foundation, again, for how students move from one city school to another. Again, the purpose of this policy is to ensure that all students have safe, stable, supportive, and effective learning environments, while also making sure that we are guaranteeing that they have equitable access to all of our schools and all of our programs. This policy really dives into how and when students can move from one school to another, how those decisions are made, and our this work is grounded in both our state law and our kind of our longstanding legal precedent. So a little bit about the numbers as we get started. So we look at last year. We had about 10,000 students that transferred from one city school to another, which represents about 13% of our student enrollment. I say this not to alarm anyone, because one of the things that I will highlight is that the majority of these transfers occurred during the designated summer transfer window that we just spoke about. That's kind of a resettling from the school choice process. But throughout the year, normally we have other factors that contribute to this work. Some of that is kind of the high residential mobility that just occurs as being in an urban city. Of course, we have reassignments that are following suspensions, disciplinary actions, of course, safety concerns, housing instability, academic re-engagement needs. All of these are reasons in which families come to us on a regular basis throughout the course of the year and are seeking possibly a reassignment. So when we think about kind of the initiatives that we currently have in place as it relates to intra-district transfers, we have been working very closely with our continuous improvement, our student wholeness team, to better understand trends that are occurring with these transfers and to provide targeted supports, not only to our schools, but also the students that we see that are requesting the various transfers. In addition to that, we've kind of, again, reduced that transfer window to happening one time a year, to eliminate kind of the disruption that it was causing in the middle of the year for our schools and also our families. We also have launched a student enrollment management system here at North Avenue. We have several offices that are approved to do transfers. So we want to make sure that we're all utilizing the same system to be better informed by the data that is within, so that we can provide those targeted support and so that we can better understand those trends that are occurring. So these policy revisions that you see today are not necessarily new concepts. They're really codifying and kind of strengthening some of the practices that we've already been embarking upon. Okay, so when we think about the proposed revisions in this policy, one of the goals was, again, to bring greater clarity to what we are already doing. So we are clearly defining which central enrollment offices. Again, I said that we have 6 teams here, have decision-making authority as it relates to enrollment and placements, really standardizing how enrollment documentation is both verified and updated, strengthening requirements for safety and administrative transfer requests. We're formalizing the use of that single transfer window we just spoke about and clarifying that we may temporarily pause assignments to a school if there are legitimate concerns that relate to safety, climate, or school staffing. And really just overall, just bringing about changes that really improve transparency, but I'm also going to say consistency across the system. We've also kind of reorganized the policy into 3 clearly defined categories of transfers. The first is going to be our family initiated transfers, which include common scenarios such as changes in residency, safety concerns or hardships, The second is going to be our administrative transfers. They occur when school leaders, but they occur by school leaders when there are significant and unexpected circumstances that arise after interventions and supports have been exhausted. And then the third is going to be, again, our IEP or Section 504 transfer, where placement decisions are determined based upon the student's individualized needs. This structure will kind of make the policy more intuitive, ensure that each type of transfer can be evaluated appropriately by the appropriate office. This is also where kind of the important alignment between the policy, JFC and EEA occurs. We see that we have the revisions here that clarify specifically that transportation is not automatically provided when a student transfers, unless a student qualifies under policy EEA. My colleague Jacinta will go more into detail, but we want to make sure that we are reinforcing that placement decisions should prioritize the closest appropriate school that can meet a student's needs rather than creating an unnecessary transportation burden for families. So really balancing student access with, again, system sustainability. Lastly, we've also strengthened and clarified the appeals process for families. So under the proposed revisions, families will submit appeals to our CEO ombudsman, and if needed, they will escalate to the board through the already established procedures in board policy BLA. This we feel like will ensure a transparent but also structured and accessible pathway for families to have their concerns reviewed while maintaining consistency in how decisions are adjudicated. Another edit that we've made, again, is kind of one of the more nuanced updates, are situations that involve egregious parent or guardian contact. These cases, let me say, are rare, but they can significantly disrupt the school environment or pose safety concerns. So this policy makes it clear that administrative transfers in these situations are a last resort, only after de-escalation strategies have been attempted and proper procedures such as restricting access to school property have been followed, but they've also been documented. We want to make sure that we're balancing school safety with also fairness and due process for all that are involved. So as we think about kind of upcoming work, we will continue to strengthen alignment, specifically with our Office of Student Conduct and Attendance, which includes clarifying how administrative transfers intersect with disciplinary actions such as suspensions and expulsions. We want to again make sure that our policies are clear and coherent across all of our enrollment offices and all areas that affect student placement decisions. And now we'll turn it over to Jacinta to cover a little bit about our student transportation services.
Good afternoon. I will be speaking in reference to Board Policy EAA, which governs student transportation services. And the purpose of this policy is to explain the parameters of our responsibility to safely transport kids to and from school. When do students get transportation services under Board Policy EEA? We have a ridership of students who are mandated by law. These students receive transportation as a related service because of their IEP or Section 504 plan. We transport McKinney-Vento students and students who are in state supervised care. Some students that we also are transported by board policy are our ELD students, as well as K through 5 students whose walking distance is greater than 1 mile, but their residence zone school is the correct school. An overview of transportation. We are currently, as of March, servicing about 6,149 students. Our budget is $46.5 million. Students, the yellow bus contract is $29.1 million. Students, we service students on yellow buses, taxis, as well as passenger vans. We also rely on MTA to transport our general ed students from 6 through 12. We do corner to corner, and we also are part of we govern extracurricular activities as well. And the majority of our students that we transport under the mandated code have a IEP or are preschool students. We just wanted to share what our demand over the past 3 years. The student demand for transportation has grown 12%. We have about, we are up last year, 2 years ago, we was transporting 5,489 kids. Right now it's 6,149. The majority of the growth are IEP and pre-K students, and they are mandated. So we must find a way to transport the students. We are using approximately 233 buses and 137 vans, which is about 80% contracted out, 20% in-house. So if we wanted to further explain some of the pressures that we have on student transportation, because it is a mandated service, we must find the resources in order to meet the mandate. So right now, 62% of the students we transport are mandated. We have a projected funding gap this year of 8.8 million. And in fiscal year 27, we are projecting a 9.5 million budget gap. We receive new students with IEPs as well as pre-K students almost daily. And so we are continuously finding ways to route. We have begun to address and look at some of our pressures, which have included the collaboration of the offices between the Office of Special Education, Transportation, to try to review the processes to ensure that the students who are receiving services are those who need the services. So we are making some changes, but we wanted to be clear what would not change. So transportation eligibility will be maintained as law. Students with disabilities with transportation as a related service, students experiencing homelessness, and students in state supervised care, eligibility requirements would remain the same. And we would continue to transport the students that live more than 1 mile away but are attending their zone school, as well as our students in swing space. We still have one school, Commodore Rogers, which is a swing space school. Some of the proposed revisions for this policy is to end providing transportation to siblings of students who receive transportation as a related service. We will no longer, we will add to the policy a statement for the pickup and drop off of students to accommodate conditions in a court approved custody order, as well as we will only transport students to a daycare if it is 2 miles or fewer from the pickup, the drop off residence. Another proposed revision, amen. In accordance to what Brandon just submitted, students with disabilities who have transportation as a related service are subject to the proposed revisions as discussed on slide 11. We also clarified that the IEP teams in section 504 teams would consult with transportation when evaluating if a student's disability needs warrants transportation as a related service. And we also are adding factors that's consistent with MSDE guidance. We also wanted to give clarification and update the MTA changes. Recently, MTA is now free to all students, city school students, and city school students 13 and up are required to show a city school's photo ID or valid fare media, and the school provides the ID to the students. We also updated the definition of school vehicle to align with the new definitions in COMAR, and we will add additional information to school vehicle into attendance to reflect the changes in the Maryland state law. And we are also streamlining many of the administrative regulations to make it more clear and concise. Our upcoming work, we are continuing to streamline the regulations associated with the board policy EAA, and we will continue to review COMAR changes as it relates to driver certification. Our engagement plan, it is a tier 3 engagement approach, and we will continue to reach out to stakeholders to get feedback with the suggested policy amendments. Our timeline, 12/22, we framed a conversation with the policy committee. We presented on today, we are presenting to the policy committee. Our first reader is May 5th, and the second reader is July 21st. Any questions?
Thank you both. Yeah, I'll open it up for questions to my other board colleagues. I guess I'll jump in with a question. What does the coordination look like with the MTA as far as like, have you all been able to get data from them or do any like get any feedback about you know, how they're supporting the district?
Could you clarify the type of data? So are you
I'm just curious about like in general, like what does that look like?
So this year, MTA removed their fare boxes and replaced their fare boxes. And so there is no data because students are not tapping when they ride. They just, you know, and we have a policy where they will allow students to ride whether they present an ID or not. We have looked at some data as far as buses arriving to schools, but because a student could kind of grab the bus or the light rail anywhere, it's hard to like pinpoint if the mode of transportation that they used by MTA was delayed or if the student was delayed. So we are working together with MTA. We're trying to get MTA reached out to city schools so that we could they'd like to create a board with the students at some of the schools where we could get their feedback. Because I think really right now, one of the biggest challenges is to just hear what the students experience, not necessarily the data, because the data doesn't tell the true story as to what time the student even left home to begin their journey to school. So we are definitely in the process, and hopefully once the fare boxes are completed, and I think they're about 98% complete, but once we move to a charm pass, and that's where MTA next year and city schools is trying to meet at that link. As far as a charm pass, that would be able also to determine like the lateness of the ride. Does that answer?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Can I just chime
It's
in
amazing.
quickly? Can I just chime in quickly? Sorry, Josh Seven, Chief Legal Officer. So we are working to update an MOU with MTA, which would have clear requirements for data that they would provide, both in terms of the on timeliness of rides, as well as Jacinta pointed out, once we have clear MTA upgrades to their fare collections, additional data on ridership, but that's been a priority of us in this engagement with MTA to push for real data.
Yeah, and it would be really nice too, like once, I like that you all explained some of the student populations, like our young people in state supervised care. So it'd also be, I think, good to see you know, like what their experiences are like if, you know, if kids have like multiple, uh, placements like within a year, like how do we like support them and like yeah, like how do we route them? But I appreciate y'all like thinking about the student populations that, um, yeah, definitely need more support.
So just like recently, like today, we had a student who has now moved like maybe 4 times in the past 2 weeks. And so instead of going through the longer process of um, the child coming off on a route and we rerouting, like we place that child in a cab, which would make it a little more easier to pivot to a new address if needed. So once we are made aware of a problem with a student, then we try to address the routing to make at least the transportation piece of it a little more seamless.
It's awesome. It's good to hear. Commissioner Ames Messenger.
Yeah, thanks. I would say I'm very excited about kind of the opportunities for more real-time data that we will be having coming up. Um, First a comment and then a question on the second part around transportation. I think first of all, like noting that these changes are significant into kind of the culture of how we and what we expect of transportation services in the district. So I think acknowledging that this will be a little bit of a culture shift for us as a community. But I think also framing that as we and as the board moves into this period of transition, as we as a city move into this period of transition over the next 3 to 5 years, the new CEO, and looking at kind of the district's new focus areas and beginning to think about how we think about the portfolio of options. And so I appreciate the work that's been gone into thinking about what are the adjustments that need to happen to transportation, realizing that transportation has some very profound impacts, as well as enrollment, which I'm coming to you next, sir. But thinking about how enrollment and transportation kind of connect to this larger picture of what we are offering in the portfolio of schools, the options that we have here in Baltimore City. So I appreciate the timeliness of this and these small changes to kind of level set in preparation to this more comprehensive collective thought partnering around the portfolio here in Baltimore. And then the second thing, I'll transition to a more concrete question. Just looking at some of the changes that are happening around clarifying transportation being offered as a service within students' IEPs and 504s, realizing just like a lot of that decision-making process happens with localized IEP teams and 504 teams that are meeting with students and families at schools. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about as you're changing what's being offered in students' IEPs, like how are we handling communication to the school level, to the teams that are making those decisions? And then how are you supporting that at the district level in the transportation office?
So the Office of Special Education worked on revising the form and the criteria for looking at a child's disability as it relates to transportation as a related service. I often say transportation is the end user. And so definitely no one in transportation is necessarily saying this student doesn't qualify for transportation, but we are simply requesting that schools do not set the mode of transportation. Like transportation will set the mode. And so we would only intervene if needed, if there is a specific request that a student can only ride on a yellow bus, for example. So we're asking for our intervention at the table at that point to say, well, we do have a lower bus that the child could ride on, and don't trap us into a mode of transportation and bond us. I don't know, is that
That's really
I can't hear you.
sorry. That is very helpful. I think my extra wondering there is just being on the school side where a lot of the interventions that are being set and required are being delivered by kind of people within the school team, and that a lot of the time transportation is different and that it is being offered centrally. So I think some of that is just like helping school teams who know the kid well and know those families well also think through sometimes at a different level what is the district load to be able to offer that and to be thinking, even as it then relates to school placement and school choice, like, is this something that really makes sense? And are we making not only the best choice for this kid and the system and the family, but kind of at all levels, that this is creating something that's cohesive. So I guess that's kind of more of a wondering, but that, yes, that absolutely answer the question, Ms. Hughes. And I think wondering just that next step of like, what is the role of how we're working with educators and teams at the school level to be thinking through transportation when that's maybe not the thing that they're thinking through every day, beyond the fact that the kid arrives on time or late or not at all to their building.
So I do know that the Office of Special Education also worked with the IEP chairs to it wasn't just a centralized change. Like we've had like a transportation work group for almost 2 years now, 18 months, 2 years. And so we're trying to get the input from those who use it, as well as a central office to make a product that's useful for both ends.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
I have a question on the enrollment side, but I was going to defer until if there are any other on the transportation side first.
Seeing no hands, I think you can go ahead.
Hold on one second, and I apologize. I have a coworker today.
No worries.
Just looking at the enrollment office, and I appreciate the changes in looking at how are we streamlining data collection, how are we thinking more critically about the tools that are using consistent communication, realizing that who this impacts at the end use is schools and kids. I think just it always sticks with me when you're saying that there are 6 people having ownership over this, and that results in a little, that is complicated sometimes. And so I guess I was just, I wanted to maybe flag that. And then also thinking just as they're kind of what are the recommendations in policy, but also just in practice as we look at budget considerations, we are in a period of transition. Kind of is there any other advice that you have to the board or thoughts of things that you would want to flag in that context, given how do we continue to move to a more cohesive system over the next couple of years?
Great flag. It is 6 offices that do have authority given to us by the board to make placement decisions. What I will say is over the course of the year, we've done a lot of work, a lot of extensive work, and first just kind of peeling back the onion and identifying who does what. Who's on deck and in what order, who's up first, who's up second, who's up third, kind of adopting kind of a what I'm going to call informally a no wrong door approach to make sure that any one of the 6 offices that families come into, that they can be adequately served and that we don't put the onus on that family to figure out how to kind of navigate the enrollment maze here at North Avenue, but that we take that and that we figure that out. So we actually have created kind of a document and presentation and everything just to kind of one level set and make sure that we all have a clear understanding as to what office is responsible for what portion. That work has been kind of codified into JFC that we just produced. That will be a part of those revisions of also identifying it for stakeholders, which office does what. And kind of who they can see for what type of service and things of that nature. So I think that's the first step. The second step is, again, we just launched our student enrollment management system. That was the second element in that we were all utilizing different systems. So moving towards one system allows us to kind of bring all of our enrollment data for the various groups of students and families that each office serves, to bring it all into one place so that when we are looking at trends, when we're looking at things that that we need to maybe pay greater attention to, or things to tell the complete story, that we will actually have the data available to do that. So I think those are kind of the 2 big things that we have been working on. We've accomplished number 1. We're about 75% on the second piece, and then I think the third piece, after we kind of do that, I think we can then kind of return to the board and kind of make a final recommendation as to what those lessons learned are and kind of the recommendations for how we can move forward.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Awesome. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for our next presentation, it'll be JFB-RA student enrollment. And this is an update to the administrative regulations.
Guess I could have stayed on screen. All right. So again, good afternoon, commissioners, colleagues, and all that are assembled. Brandon Tillman, again, representing the Office of Enrollment, Choice, and Transfer. Also joined here on this call by my colleagues from Early Learning. But I'm here to present kind of a summary of revisions that have been made to Administrative Regulation JFB-RA, and this governs our overall student enrollment procedures. Pursuant to Board Policy BGD, because these revisions are made without precipitating change to board policy, the memo is just being shared with Policy Committee as an information item. But I will say these updates were developed through a collaborative effort between the Office of Legal Counsel, our academics office, and the Office of Communication Engagement and Enrollment. The primary goal was to really align our regulations with the Blueprint for Maryland's Future and current state law as it relates to our method of delivering pre-K to eligible students, in addition to a few minor updates regarding the enrollment practice and process. And I should say that kind of those updates are really reflecting some of the practices that are already in place, just making sure that they are reflected in our administrative regulations. Again, kind of the primary changes involve how we deliver pre-K services. So the first thing I was taught with was kind of the pre-K waivers. In general, here in Baltimore City Public Schools, a student must be 4 or older on September 1st of the school year that they are applying for entry into school. Students who do not meet this age requirement can be eligible in pre-K, though, in other ways, such as a pre-K waiver. The regulation now explicitly talks about that process and says that, you know, for students who turn 4 between September 2nd and September 30th, they are eligible for consideration of a waiver. But to qualify, they must meet specific criteria, such as income eligibility, housing instability or the documentation of such, and any type of educational needs, such as language development services that warrants an additional year of pre-K intervention. The second piece was to align with the Blueprint's call for a mixed delivery system. Again, that's an effort to kind of expand access throughout the state of Maryland for our 3- and 4-year-olds. And it involves collaboration between public school systems and private providers, such as local Head Start or other child care centers, particularly for those children who are not eligible for kindergarten or who do not meet the waiver requirements. They can still enroll a 3-year-old into an early childhood program. So we wanted to make sure that our regulation reflected that. And then the second piece was to really, again, codify our Priority 1 enrollment and that whole entire process. This includes, when we say Priority 1 grouping for pre-K enrollment, it includes students who are economically disadvantaged, our students that are experiencing homelessness, those who have a disability, or those that are eligible for English language development services. Again, this grouping receives priority placement in our enrollment process for pre-K. That has been the case, but we wanted to make sure that it was clearly reflected in our administrative regulation. Other changes relate to just simply language and legal protections. So we strengthened language regarding student rights and inclusion. Specifically, revisions clarify that City Schools does not ask for, we do not require, we do not collect any information regarding citizenship or immigration status of students or families. In addition, for our students that have Section 504 plans, we added language to ensure that enrollment procedures for students with disabilities equally apply to those students with Section 504 plans, not just those with individualized educational programs or IEPs. That was not clear in our previous version of the regulations. And then just to keep the regulation current, we updated several terms to match existing board policies. So where we see English language learner in our regulation, we've replaced that with multilingual learner. Where we see the Office of Enrollment and Attendance, we've replaced that with the Office of Enrollment, Choice, and Transfers. And then just added language regarding immunization requirements to really improve just kind of understanding and readability, but also ensuring that it aligns with what COMAR is asking us as a district to do. I will say that while these updates address our immediate needs, our various offices, those 6 offices I talked about in the previous presentation, and in consultation with our legal office, have identified some other areas for refinement, including issues as it relates to kind of documentation for enrollment and other enrollment-related protocols. So as a result, we plan to propose adding board policy JFB to the policy review calendar for next school year, so that we can come forward with recommendations for a more comprehensive update to the overall policy. But other than that kind of concludes the revisions that were made as a part of this regulation. So happy to take any questions that anyone may have.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I'll open it up for questions. I guess I'll kick us off. Yeah, I wanted to ask if you could clarify a little bit about pre-K populations who get priority in enrollment.
Sure. So those are our families that are considered income eligible. So those are, again, kind of looking at the federal poverty level below 300% in alignment. Those things have not changed. Those students that are McKinney-Vento and are dealing with some housing instability. Those students that are in need of language development services or receiving special education services, all of those students, all of those factors would qualify a student to be considered priority 1, in addition to them meeting the age requirement of being 4 on or before September 1st of the year that they're applying. That has been our practice for a number of years. Just wanted to make sure that it was clearly articulated in the regulation. Previously, it was not exactly as clear, but we wanted to kind of take the ambiguity out of it and make sure that it was streamlined for clarity.
I have a follow-up question. I was just curious if you all coordinate a lot with the infants and toddlers program or recruit, since they're like the first touch point for students that may qualify as far as like receiving services.
And you talking about, do we work very closely with our Office of Early Learning?
No, so the
Oh.
infants and toddlers program is a program outside of the school system for kiddos that are really young to 3 years old. And so, yeah, I was just curious if like maybe we should recruit from there because those kids are already identified as like needing additional support.
So the reason why I brought up Office of Early Learning, they're actually one of our enrollment partners. They're one of our enrollment teams. So certainly that's a whole entire enrollment office, and they work very closely with not only that particular program, but those kind of, when I talked about kind of those private providers and those private entities, they work very closely with those individuals to kind of recruit and to kind of support, and kind of, we use that as kind of our folks, kind of frontline folks as we're advertising about our pre-K campaigns and all of those types of things. So that is an already kind of actively active partner that we have in this particular process. But that's not through my particular office, but yes, City Schools as one of our office, one of our enrollment offices is a strong partner with them.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because that was really helpful. Like my kiddo was in the infants and toddlers program, then transition into pre-K, and that was really, really helpful.
Yes, and actually this year specifically, not only were we able to bring members from that particular program, but we were able to work with some of the other programs throughout the city. Basically, I call it a kind of a convening with all of our partners throughout, all of our agencies, all of our private partners that touch our 3- and 4-year-old communities, came together kind of as a kickoff with Mayor Scott and some of the other politicians, local dignitaries throughout the city to kind of have a kickoff of, we're all in this together. We're all trying to make sure that our students and families get off to a strong start. So it's really about kind of making sure that we can all speak about the different programs that we have, that we can all kind of streamline and kind of demystify for many of our families that this is their first time that they're looking to put their children in school, how we can kind of, again, make the process a little bit clearer and more easily understood. So that was something that was a very interesting start of this year, and it kind of has led to an uptick in the number of applications that we've received thus far.
Awesome. Yeah, and
Mhm.
definitely, it would be really helpful if you let the policy committee know if there's any other improvements that you see, like as you're going through the process, with like implementing these changes. If there's any way that the policy can be improved like further, yeah, that'd be.
And I'm
amazing.
glad you said, I'm
Yeah.
glad you said that, because that's what we've been doing, not just the Office of Enrollment, Choice and Transfer, but we've tasked each of the other 5 enrollment offices to kind of do the same thing. I will say we have a running list. So that's one
Okay.
of the reasons why we definitely want to come back as we were doing the regulation. Certainly, we've noticed several things in which we can really improve to make it better for families and our school partners. So we already have a tally of that, and we will be coming back to you next school year to kind of embark upon the entire policy revision process for JFB.
Awesome. Thank
Mhm.
you. Yeah, and Commissioner Ames Messenger saw a hand.
I was just going to ask, related to that, do you know when we're getting the progress monitoring report on, or I guess when and if, for pre-K enrollment, and specifically like the number of seats available, the number that were filled, the number in each of the priority brackets, and kind of timeline of that? Do you know when we get that?
I actually think that it occurs in the fall, the early
That feels right.
Mhm.
fall after we conclude September
Okay.
30th, but I don't have the exact date on me, but I can follow up with
I
you on
can
that.
follow it. You got
Yep.
enough to do. I'll follow up with the board office.
Okay.
That makes sense. Thank you.
But that's usually at the conclusion of once we go through per pupil count.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
2 presentations. Okay. And next we have updates to JEA-RA attendance.
Good afternoon. Good
Afternoon.
afternoon. Policy Committee. My name is Dr. Tanya Williams. I'm the coordinator in the Office of Student Conduct and Attendance. And today I will be before you just to talk to you about City Schools is actually revising JEA-RA in light of questions from students and staff about the impact of immigration enforcement. So just a little background, we know that COMAR provides information about which students can be considered lawfully absent. And so one of these current circumstances is an emergency or set of circumstances which equals a good cause for a student to be absent from school. And so our current board policy, JEA, already identifies this emergency category of lawful absences. However, neither our current policy nor the regulation clarifies when it's appropriate to excuse a student's absence under this emergency category, which I will talk to you about today. And so the revisions are, again, to clarify what we already are doing in city schools, including our attendance leads here in the Office of Student Conduct and Attendance, what our school leaders are doing to support students and families around absences, both excused and unexcused. But we also want to make it clearer for all stakeholders when absences may be excused under this emergency category. So just an explanation about what equals a family emergency. So it's consistent with state law and the board policy. City schools and a school attendance lead, a school leader can excuse an absence under this new section for an emergency, as I said, such as a student has an emergency, that's important, or a student is accompanying a parent, guardian, or sibling to some sort of court appearance, an administrative agency, for example, like state supervised care, immigration, or something to do with like the criminal law. I also mentioned early on that it focuses on a student. So if a student needs to address an emergency, that directly impacts the entire family. And we know in this climate that we're living in today, there could be potentially many emergencies that families are dealing with. We talk about housing, loss of housing, it could be loss of a job. Unfortunately, it could be a fire, a flood, something happening within the family that we want to excuse those student absences. It really is important for a student's absence to be excused under this section. One of the requirements is that there needs to be some type of documentation. So if a parent or guardian can provide a note, we know that students, as I mentioned, in state supervised care, may be able to get a note from the foster care agency or the agency that is supporting them. For high school students or students that are unaccompanied, the unaccompanied minor can write their own note and get it into the school. We also recognize that in this current age that we're in, there are other options in addition to just writing a note. So we've had families call into the school, the attendance lead or registrar makes a note of what the family is saying, and then counts that towards the excused absence. We also know some families may send emails, and so that also will equal documentation required for this. So it's important in this new language that all families know that up to 3 absences per school year can be excused under this new family emergency section. If, for example, a family needs more than those 3 absences, and we know that many times when our families are dealing with emergencies, things related to court, immigration, or even some appointments related to state supervised care, it could take more than 3 days. And so what the school attendance lead will be instructed to do, as they do for other absences, they will call our office. We have staff here who go into schools but are also located in district office. They can call and email, discuss the family situation, and then ask for approval for the family to get those additional absences, and those will be excused. Our goal is we want to remain empathetic to what our families are dealing with, who are dealing with family emergencies or appointments, but we also want families to understand at the same time that our goal is to get students back in school as soon as possible after the family emergency. And we all know that regular attendance is what is really important, because it's not just about the student attending school, it's about the supports that are offered to not only just the student, but the family as well, including wholeness supports, wellness, connecting with their related service provider, and also connecting with their peers. It's very important when students and families are dealing with emergencies or times of instability. Connected to that, we also added new language. We wanted to make it as clear as possible for students and families. And we separated it into early dismissal, makeup work, technical updates, and how we are monitoring state changes. And overall, we wanted to make the language, again, clearer for our students, families, and stakeholders. We wanted to make it clear for schools when they are providing supports to families. And we also wanted to make it clear for partners if they had questions on what supports families would need and how they could best support families. I want to point you to the last section, which is monitoring the state changes. Recently, MSDE proposed changes to COMAR on student attendance. So if these proposed changes are approved, and they include changes to the definition of chronic absenteeism, chronic absence, what day of attendance means, and then MTSS, in addition to how we already focus on attendance, how we monitor attendance, the penalties for not meeting regular attendance standards, if those changes are approved, we at City Schools and the Office of Student Conduct and Attendance will need to add new definitions. We will also need to update our procedures so that schools have the information and also families and students. And so to develop all of the revisions that I've talked with you about today, I've mentioned the Office of Student Conduct and Attendance many times, but we also worked with the Office of Legal Counsel, the Office of Student, the school's office, excuse me. And we also collaborated with attendance teams in schools, and we consulted with school principals. And so in consultation with these additional stakeholders, we reviewed what the current law says and also COMAR. We checked to see if we were in aligned with other board policies. And then we looked at regulations for other school systems. And so after looking at all that, we determined that these updates and revisions to our current JEARA would be supported by schools and families and students, and it would allow students and families who are dealing with emergencies or instability to be able to request that absences that prior to this would be documented as unexcused can now be documented as excused. And so that concludes the presentation today. If there are other questions, I've placed my email at the bottom. Would happy to hear additional questions and or comments. I did want to add that in this regulation, I talked about support. And so every week, the attendance leads in schools come together with our office, and we have office hours. Usually weekly, we have about anywhere from 80 to 90 participants, and that includes attendance leads, community school coordinators, related service providers, registrars, anybody in the school that works on attendance or wants to learn more about attendance. The great thing about these office hours is it's not just our office presenting. It's a series of offices throughout the district.
The initial complaint to when there is kind of what's the timeline for the investigation to when there's a ruling to when there's an appeal, realizing that you're already midstream for the appeal, and also kind of on the front end, how long are people waiting when it's perceived as like nothing's being done, when really in the background there's lots being done. So just for the board clarity around the timing of the full process on average start to end.
Okay.
Hi,
Got it.
hi, everybody. This is Yusuf. Sorry about that. It seems the board office lost access to production tools. I think Tanisha mentioned it. I'm not sure if you're able to hear her, but we're still working on the fix.
Thank you.
But no other questions at this point. And thank you, Tanisha. I know this is a heavy lift.
Thank you. And I do have your follow-up, Commissioner Ames Messenger and Commissioner Esposito. Thank you both for your patience as well.
Of course. There's no other questions. I know we did not have public comment for today. So that pretty much wraps up our policy committee meeting. Wanted to thank everyone for attending. Our next policy committee meeting is going to be on April 28th, virtually at 4. And let me see, we will be trying to pull up our policy calendar real quick. We will be discussing policy JFL, child abuse and neglect, tier 2, policy BDD, board committees, tier 1. And similar to this meeting, the public can sign up to provide public comment. We allow 5 individuals the opportunity to provide written or pre-recorded comment to the policy committee, and each speaker will get 3 minutes. And you can contact us at the board office to submit your public comment. And Also, just want to reiterate that the policy feedback form is really useful because you can submit feedback anytime for the policies that you drop down from the form. You can decide, I want to make a comment about this specific policy, we'll receive that, and then you'll receive a response back from our team. So really appreciate everyone for presenting and everybody for attending. Do I have a motion to adjourn? I know I can't see anything, so I'm like,
So move, a motion
can
to
see
adjourn.
you.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Commissioner Ames Messenger. Have a good evening, everyone.
You too.
All
Be
right,
well.
thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you. Have a good
everyone, for your work.
evening.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.